Draw your lot, dear viewers. In today's podcast, Roll of a Tangent shall analyze a classical short tale for your pleasure. The Lottery, by Shirley Jackson, was first published in June 1948 issue of The New Yorker. Said paper was flooded by mail and responses once the story came out, so much so that in the magazine's history, no other tale has grabbed so much attention since. Said tale depicts an average rural village in New England, where a yearly ritual is maintained, one which none dare to question nor refuse. The story is written in simple, well-constructed prose, which leaps off the page and immerses the reader in the horrifyingly mundane atmosphere of the world's most gruesome pastime. If I piqued your interest, dear listener, you should read the story now. This is another one of those capers where reading it is preferable before listening to our review, as there is no way to truly dismantle this piece without spoiling the ending. Once you've given it a read, come back to us. While you do that, however, we shall start the discussion. So, my dear co-hosts, let's begin this. Let's see what you have to say about the lottery. Why don't we go with Robert first? What did you think of the lottery by Miss Jackson?
It fulfilled its aim with me in that I was only a few sentences before the end when I began to suspect what was going to happen. Didn't at first. The pile of stones mentioned near the beginning, well, I didn't twig what it was going to be used for. Just thought that maybe this lad who'd collected them was just going to mess around with them while the other stuff was going on because he was perhaps bored with the whole gathering. And that's quite a compliment. It's either shows how dim I am or it shows how good the author is that she could hold back her conclusions in this way. Of course, once you do see the ending, then you look back, you can see there were many hints, and it's not too surprising that the message you're supposed to take from it is that, well, for one thing, unthinking adherence to tradition is a bad thing. Although you can then go on to argue that thinking adherence to it is bad as well, because not all of them are unthinking. Some of them, the ones who say that to abandon the lottery would be foolishness, have obviously done some thinking and decided to keep it on, which is another sinister and gruesome aspect to the tale. They actually want it to happen because they think it will do some good. And uh, another point is that I suppose, I don't know if one ought to say this, but the kind of thing that happens at the end of the story is by no means extinct in real life in today's world. So, definitely a high mark for this tale. I'm not sure I would reread it, and that's perhaps the single disadvantage of this kind of story, in that it's so bound up with the shock ending that once you've read it, you don't really feel the need to reread it. I think it's a bit like Ray Bradbury's story, The Smile, which similarly is short and has a shock ending and is meant to display one aspect of the evil in the world. Although in that case, and I'm going to spoil The Smile for you all, in that case, it's about the resentment in a post apocalyptic world, resentment felt for all culture, the idea that culture is what led us to this, and therefore culture is bad, and so we're destroying works of art. And the smile is the smile on the of the Mona Lisa, which is being ripped to shreds. Now, that's a punchline story, and this is a punchline story. And punchline stories have this one drawback that once you know the punchline, you don't have to reread it. But it's very good.
I will say that rereading it at least one more time after you've gotten the shock and horror out of your system would be beneficial to you, because as you said yourself, you will start seeing all these interesting conundrums, the situations, the way this whole scene plays out. Once you know what's exactly going on, it colors the situation very differently, and the sinister nature of all of those comments, the mundaneness of it, really, jumps towards you as you read it.
Sure.
Akshay, what about you? How did you feel about the lottery?
Right. Well, but before I actually give my thoughts, Anthony was unable to join us today. To our listeners, Anthony was unable to join us today, but he did give us some of his thoughts, and I shall read them out today for our listeners. So, for Anthony, he thinks that the lottery is a seminal tale in the 20th century that gave rise to many imitators. To mention imitators might give away the plot, however, but we're spoiling it, so, too bad. Let's just say any tale since 1948 that depicts blind obedience to tradition owes something to Shirley Jackson, be it inspiration or royalties. This tale gets a 10 out of 10 from him for his excellent execution with an economy of words that make it a masterclass of the writing craft. Wow, high praise. What do you know?
Strong words.
Yes. All right. As for myself, the story itself is not bad. It's definitely better than Starship Troopers. Why do I compare it to Starship Troopers?
High praise right there from Akshay. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Why do I compare it to Starship Troopers? Rob said to Rob is a punchline story, and before he actually made that comment, I didn't think of it as a punchline story, but it makes sense. For me, it's a moralizing story. It is very clear that it's a cautionary tale. It's trying to preach something, but it's at least done much better than Starship Troopers, and that's why I compare it to that. The flow of the story, it's very similar to Lord of the Flies, I feel, and maybe even The Long Walk, which both of you hated.
I mean, there were two really good chapters in that book.
Yeah. I am actually, there are certain things that I'm sure we will touch on as our discussion evolve, and some of them really, one of the things that I think is masterfully done in the lottery is the very slow and careful sprinkling of clues as to what exactly is going on in the village as the tale progresses, that if you reread it, and this is where I come down with Nikki here, because it is actually worth rereading at least once, and that is, you can start to see the little clues Shirley Jackson had planted along the way that pointed towards the ending. And those are great as plot devices. So the story itself is good. I am actually more fascinated by the history surrounding this story. Like, the Wikipedia article on it is so much more interesting to me than the story itself. Let me just pull it up here. So as Nikki had alluded to, this short story had garnered a great deal of shall we say, feedback from readers of the New Yorker back at that time, and most of them are hate mail. It was thoroughly abhorred when it came out, and I am particularly fascinated by the little segment in the Wikipedia article about the lottery that says that many people had actually written to Shirley Jackson asking her where this tradition is going on so that they can go watch it. And I'm like, wow. it's really interesting because I think if we all take a step back, there are certain traditions that we grow up being very used to that is very difficult for us to have a perspective that that allows us to sit down and see the right and wrong of it. I think if you grew up in a place where a certain morality had taken root, I think it will be very hard to break out of that mode. And that is why I think, personally for me, I think it's very beneficial for people to go out of their comfort zone every once in a while, experience other cultures, experience other ways of thinking. And I think the internet these days is a great boon because it does allow us to do that without having to leave our seat as a couch potato. But yeah, I think, well, like I said, I think the reaction surrounding the story is more fascinating to me than the story itself actually is. All right, back to you, Nikki.
All right. Yeah, so here's something, right? We in 2023 live in a world that is very much filled with technology and giant cities, and nature is further and further away from us. But in 1948, when Shirley Jackson wrote this, and one of the reasons she got so much hate mail, the truth of the rural America was these types of communities, these places where people lived and farmed, and generations upon generations came together. And one of the best ways to make sure that people stay in a communicative way with one another is to create things which will bring them closer and closer together. And actually, after researching this tale for a while, something like the lottery, at least an homage to it, let's put it like that, did happen. And it's nothing to do with anyone dying or being stoned, but it's to do with individuals coming up to everybody at the end of the year and basically being like, look, we're gonna have a big fair, and to make sure that people attend, we're gonna do a lottery there. So why don't you give us a little bit of money? We'll put it in a pot, and whoever wins gets all of it, right? So that was one of the main attractions for such gatherings, right? A lottery that would bring people together, and everybody would draw, and somebody might get lucky. Now, in the lottery by Shirley Jackson, if you draw it, you're unlucky, right? I guess that's the one difference that she made towards this tradition. But it is it's very blatant because she grew up in one of these communities that she didn't really have a good experience regarding it. Otherwise, one would not write such a tale and bring light towards some of the strange and obscure things regarding those communities. And the way I see it, at the very least, when I researched this whole thing, my conclusion in my head is that Shirley Jackson is trying to say blindly following traditions will be the undoing of any good civilization, right? So she's saying this is what we gotta stop. Look at the way this has caused someone's death for basically no reason. What's to me, the most horrifying thing about the lottery is that there's no explanation. Why did this whole thing come about? What is the reason that someone is being stoned and killed at the end? There, nothing. We have no idea. Besides, it's tradition. It's what gets done.
I do believe they have a reason. Yeah. It is for good harvest.
What is it?
Good harvest.
Yeah.
They say that in the story?
Yeah. It was implied, not stated outright.
Okay.
I think early in the beginning there was a older guy. He was like, the lottery is held in June, and fat corn will come this summer or something like that, something along those lines. So it's implied that the stoning is for
Okay,
good
well, it's
harvest.
fascinating that it seems that both of you saw that because I didn't see that at all from my multiple readings. It still seems pointless to me, and I think my point still stands. Irregardless, killing somebody doesn't bring good harvest.
No. In
I
other
mean,
words,
it's clearly a form of superstition, which I imagine is fairly common back in the day, like some blood sacrifice thing for good harvest and all that. But I'm trying to find the. No, I can't find it. But I
Yes,
do
so that-
believe it's there. Yeah.
Okay. That's good to know. Irregardless, I still believe that the pointlessness of this sacrifice, of the killing of this woman, whose her only complaint as she's being stoned, that she doesn't believe that it was fair. That the drawing had been done this way. So she's not like, we should, you know what? Maybe this is a bad idea. We should maybe stop this. She's like, no, someone else should die. Not me. That's so fucked. I'm sorry to say it, but it's the only way to describe it. It's so horrible. And I can imagine people being like this. I've met people like this who are like, oh yeah, that it's terrible that it's happened to me. You know? Anybody else. But it's happening to me now, so that's why I'm upset. You just think like, God. May all the destruction of the world lay upon the doors of such people. So you can constantly be saying, well, today it's me.
Yeah, I met someone like that as well. To do with, I was agitating for the ban on whaling because killing a creature with an explosive harpoon is so hideous. And this woman said, "Ah, but it's the whales having it done to, not me." So what does one say?
Oh my God. Could we get an explosive harpoon in the studio, please? Oh, madam, please, don't move. Drum roll!
Okay, that's
That
wow,
would be great. I would have watched that.
That's pretty grisly.
I think I would, what's it called? Be one of the people writing to Shirley Jackson, being like, where is this happening? And not because I want to watch it, because I would be fascinated. If I was in a Lovecraft story, I would die almost immediately, because I'd be the idiot investigating. I'd be like, crab people eating humans, awesome. Where am I going? Like,
Right.
where is this place? Um, but yeah, for me, to stop trying to find meaning in the story, let me just tell you how I felt about it. I think the prose, just as I described it at the beginning, is very poignant. It's short. It uses sentences in a beautiful fashion where there's a lot of shorter sentences that then lead you into longer descriptions, and the beginning is very simmer down, sit down, and get an understanding of this village, get a tall glass of milk, and then, as the mundaneness of this ritual that they're performing, how, the description of the black box, how it's coveted in a way, but it's not the original box. And there's a whole section about the box. I love it. I love it. It's world building done right. Because you're fascinated by it, you're interested by it, and it keeps the mystery alive. Even if you are one of those people who has consumed so much of modern media that basically nothing can surprise you, and you can figure out immediately, oh, someone's getting killed at the end. Um, you are still going to be sitting there enjoying the tension just by the fact of how mastercrafted this short story is made. You want to see the end, when you know what's going to happen. But then at the same time, you kind of want to spend time with the passages that are moving ever so quickly by. I couldn't think that this story should be made longer. Yet in my mind, I wish it was. Because I just wanted to spend more time at the lottery.
Hmm. I feel positive about the story as well. But also I'm not entirely out of sympathy with XJ's comment on the sort of preachiness of this kind of story. I do think that it's very obviously, once I've finished reading it, that is, that's very obviously making a point. Not that I mind that sort of thing as much as XJ does, but there's something I'd like to say, which is that it's sometimes rather odd the kind of point that people see fit to make when they make it. I mean, maybe 1948 was probably different, but I would say that nowadays, just about the last thing you need to guard against is excessive veneration of tradition. Nowadays, everything is in virtual chaos. It's like trying to warn hippies against excessive puritanism. It's like really missing the point. But nevertheless, in its own terms, it's a great story.
I mean, it was written in 1948, and it clearly
Mm,
struck a nerve back then, or she wouldn't have gotten so many hate mail. I mean, it's like Nikki said, a more modern reader could see it coming a mile away, like the ending, the punchline, so to speak, a mile away, and
mm,
um, as Anthony has said, it's all the stuff that came after that had this kind of setup, owe their inspiration to Shirley Jackson. So we have to give it that
mm,
pay that respect to the story. But
mm,
um, I think in 1948, just based on the response that she got, Shirley Jackson got, it clearly hit something.
mm,
Yeah, America of those times was a very conservative, God fearing nation, right? It's very different from today. the minority that currently exists in America used to be the majority, right? Tradition was king.
Clearly, I mean, the message itself is, I think, outdated, as you said, Robert. But I guess the thing is, a moralizing story that tickled everybody's funny bone who read it back in the day would probably look different to us right in this time and age. Like it would be a different. I'm not sure if I'm being clear or not, but the preaching would be of a different matter, of a different moral, shall we say, and it will tickle the funny bone of quite a lot of people, because we're not used to having that criticism leveled at us. And I guess that is I suppose that's the point of it, maybe.
I think you can shift the direction of the way you look at the story, and by that way you can preserve the moral to apply to almost anything. And that's taking the story out of the context of traditionalism. All it's really saying is you should never follow anything blindly, just without ever thinking about it.
Yeah, groupthink is the.
Yeah, exactly. Groupthink. That's right. Yeah. So that way it becomes timeless, because anytime that you do something in life, I'm sure there's been many times over where you've done something and you've realized that everybody has done it all your life around you. And then somebody from the outside asks, why do you do it like that? And sometimes it's silly things, like, for example, a lot of Russian folk drink their tea with a spoon still inside. That's why there's a Russian joke about a spy, and he goes to England, right? Obviously, nobody in England knows that we drink tea like that, but whatever. In this joke, this is the case, right? And he orders a cup of tea and he drinks it, and the bartender comes over and goes like, I'm sorry, are you from Russia? You're a Russian agent. And he says, how did you know? And he's like, well, drinking your tea with the spoon still in it. And he goes, oh, well, thank you very much.
That's so funny,
and then,
because
okay, go on.
Because we drink tea with the spoon in the cup too, back in Singapore.
Funny. Anyway, so you can translate this directly to Singapore then, and the Singapore Special Forces. Anyway, he goes to the second bar, and he drinks tea, and he's like, I gotcha. He takes out the spoon, and he starts drinking, and the bartender comes over and goes like, I'm sorry, but are you Russian? And he goes like, why? Like, how did you know? I took out the spoon. It's like, yeah, but you're still closing the other eye so it doesn't poke it. Right? So he's still doing this while drinking the tea. Anyway, traditions are silly. Some traditions are beautiful and some traditions are silly. And we get really ruffled up when somebody calls our traditions in particular silly, right? But one should not be offended by it. It's just a quirk. It's something of culture that has survived for generations, and most of them are harmless, like drinking tea with a spoon still in it. But some of them lead to the lottery, right? So
I would say I would just rephrase that a little bit. I would say that most traditions probably made sense when they came about back when it originated, it probably made sense. It's just that as time passes, it makes less sense because the circumstances that birthed the tradition is no longer there.
Possibly. Yeah.
So if we understood why Russians drink tea with their spoons in the cup, I bet that would
I mean,
make sense.
I could tell you.
Then tell us.
I could tell. I mean, then you gotta put it somewhere. You gotta have like an additional thing. But this way, you're just like drinking it and it's convenient. That's why they do it. That's where it came about. I'm so sure of it. And nobody's gonna say anything to you if you drink it without, right? The spoon in there. It's not like a tradition that's enforced or something. It's just that it's something you notice. It's something you realize. It's also because of the French and German nobility coming into, and British nobility coming into the motherland in the late 18th and 19th centuries. It was considered bad manners. It started to be considered like, you're a worker. That's why you have your spoon in your teacup. You don't even have like a little place to put your teaspoon to. So you're poor. So it started to be the symbol of the poor. And then the Soviets were like, yeah, we are poor. Everybody put your teaspoons into the cups. So
if
that's why
if that is the truth, then it totally makes sense to have that tradition. Is an identity of sort. Lots of people would do contrary things to what other people don't do, just so they can differentiate themselves from that other group. So
it's like the people, the superstars of football, American football, who decided to kneel during the national anthem. And people got really mad about it. But when you think about it, kneeling is a form of even more respect than just standing, isn't it? Like somebody kneeling in front of the king. So it's kind of silly that people are like annoyed at them disrespecting something where they're arguably showing more respect for it by kneeling for it. But that's why it doesn't make any sense to me. That's why I believe traditions are silly at the end of the day.
And you have the big enders versus the little enders in Gulliver's Travels. In the realm of Lilliput in Jonathan Swift's book, there's a huge feud between those members of society that open their boiled egg at the big end and those that open their boiled egg at the little end. And thousands of people get put to death because they open their egg at the wrong end, sort of thing. It's meant to be a satire on Catholics versus Protestants and religious wars and that sort of thing.
So, well, I gotta say, as a non-practitioner of Christianity, I really have to say that the differences between Protestants and Catholics are so esoteric to me. So there is some truth in that.
Well,
yeah, it's the same. Yeah.
To me, it's the same thing. It's just one has better clothes, more fancy clothes. I gotta say, I like those robes that those Catholic bishops and all they have, and their funny hats and stuff like that. They definitely got interesting sense of fashion, I suppose.
Well, it's like Stalinists versus Trotskyists, I suppose.
Exactly. I can't tell the difference, like from where I'm sitting.
Well, one begins with an S and one begins with a T. I think that's
right. Yeah, big difference.
The proletariat will remember your words, Comrade Robert and Comrade XJ.
Yeah. But going back to the story, I don't know that what I said about traditions making sense in their time could be translated to this particular story though, because it feels like a literary device like that is artificially
Well,
constructed to.
if you look real hard, you can see some sort of places where there was a culling, and it usually happened because there was not enough food to feed people. So rather than it
Right.
being
Right.
just killing somebody randomly feels a little bit less horrible than just
Well,
deciding on
I
somebody.
mean, so I did find the actual line that that suggests to us that this is a harvest ritual, which is uh let's see, children pile up stones as the adults assemble for the annual event, practice to ensure a good harvest. Old man Warner quotes an old proverb: "Lottery in June, corn be heavy soon." So the thing is, the thing is, I really can't see how stoning somebody translates to good harvest. And I was really trying to see it from the villagers' point of view, like all kinds of superstition. I just don't, unless they believe in some strange god uh, that demands human sacrifice for good harvest, particularly in the way of stoning. I just don't see how that tradition could have taken root in a way that made sense, which is far different from culling, because the villagers are in like a sort of famine. So I think for the lottery, the stoning is probably a literary device, and therefore what I said about traditions making sense in their time probably doesn't translate to this story anyway.
Yeah, but it's a historical fact that that kind of sacrifice did take place in early historic times, and presumably, whatever thought process led to it could recur in the far future, because presumably this story is set in the far future. After all, if it weren't, then it, this kind of situation wouldn't be allowed to happen. It would have to be after a big lapse of time.
Not in modern times for sure.
Mm.
Yeah. Well,
Mm.
I feel like I don't have anything else to say about the story, to be quite honest.
Mm.
Nikki?
All right.
Yeah.
Well, this is a tremendous story that everyone should read. It's short and punchy. If you made it all this way through the podcast and you haven't read it yet, I still recommend it, even though it has been spoiled for you. Because, as I say, the craftsmanship on display is fantastic. I give it a 10 out of 10.
So do I.
Wow. I'm the one giving it the lowest score. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10.
Well, as we established before the recording has begun, a new tradition that has happened, that we stone the person who gives the lowest score. So XJ,
I am in the
you knew the
company.
risks.
I am in the company of some really bloodthirsty people.
Well,
If we stone XJ, we can't have any more podcasts because
it's true. I guess he gets a what's it called,
A pass.
a pass. Yeah, pardon for
Yeah.
this time. But next time,
Well,
who knows what happens?
I give it a 8 mostly for the historical importance of the story, which it can't be denied, given the response it garnered. But well, I don't dislike the story. the story itself is not bad, but preachy stories just isn't up my alley, as Robert had pointed out. That is why it's an 8 and not any higher. Well, I guess we have came to the end of this very this analysis of this very interesting story, and I should like to say that this is our last podcast for 2023, and we are a tadpole of a podcast. We are very tiny, and yet I know we have people who tune in from time to time to listen to us jabber and say quite meaningless things, perhaps, and giving us your attention. And I would just like to thank everybody that had sat down and listened to us and given us your attention. I am very grateful for that. I especially want to thank some people that I know have tuned in from time to time. They are Nikki's friends, David, Evan, Matthew. Thank you so much. And of course, Rob's brother, Antolin. Have I got that right?
Yep.
Antolin. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast from time to time. Thank you so much for any likes that you might have given us. I wish you a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and a great 2024 ahead to all our listeners.